Hello. So I'll give people time to join. I'm Alexis, if you don't know me. It's another snowy day in upstate New York. Anyway, today is the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere where I am based on this sweater, and the summer solstice in the southern hemisphere. So I want to talk about what a solstice means and what you can do on the solstice, and also some thoughts on balance. So I also have an egg bake in the oven because I just got out of teaching yoga and I'm hungry, so do not let me forget to take the egg bake out of the oven. Okay, so here's what the solstice is. Hey Billy, thanks for joining. So unlike the equinox, which is a perfectly balanced day, right? The equinox is when night and day are the same time. The solstice is inherently about imbalance. It's about something being way more or way less than the other. So for a lot of us in the northern hemisphere, you're like, oh, this is the shortest day of the year. Yes, that means we're back on the way to summer. And if you're in the southern hemisphere, maybe you just got there. So the focus here, David, relax. So the focus here is on imbalance. Imbalance. And imbalance is a really powerful part of our lives. So when we look at things like, I'm going to talk about yogic philosophy here for a minute. So from the yogic view, everything is one. Everything is one. We're all an aspect of life that's coming through us. So there's no difference between you and me or anything around us because everything is one. That's a very hard way to live on a daily basis. So to live in that state of like, universal oneness is a really, like we expect the Dalai Lama maybe is living that way, but for the rest of us, that's a really hard way to live. The rest of us live in a state of duality. Black, white, pleasure, pain, hot, cold, dislike, likes. So we have these two ways that we navigate the world because our experience of the world is a sensory experience. We see it, we hear it, we taste it, we smell it, we touch, we feel. So when we're moving through life, this thing around us, we experience life through our senses. And our senses give us feedback and give us input. And that input falls on a spectrum of these dichotomies: good, bad, light, dark, masculine, feminine. And that way we can get our heads around oneness. We get to experience oneness as an actual sensory experience. So when it comes to something like the solstice, we're inherently on one end of a spectrum of a dichotomy. So now in the northern hemisphere, we're in the dark. We're in the turning inward. We're in the really reflecting the internal phase of the year. And the summer solstice is the opposite. There's more light. It's a massive imbalance of light. It's the other end of the spectrum. And the other end of the spectrum is this opening, the energizing, the expansive, the moving outwards. So when you think about how do I recognize the solstice, what does this mean for me? How does this apply to my life? Why in modern society do I even think about the solstice? We think about the solstice because it gives us an opportunity to look at bigger themes going on in our lives. It gives us a framework to apply to things that we might be experiencing in life. So imbalance is a natural part of life. It's not like there's this magical moment of balance. There's an equinox in the calendar, so maybe there's an equinox in ourselves, but life is always moving on one end of the spectrum or the other. We're swinging between one end of a dichotomy and the other end of the dichotomy, right? And that's how we experience life. But all of that, both ends of the spectrum are still within the realm of oneness. So I know this is a deep conversation. We'll bring it back to reality in just a second. But both ends of the spectrum are still one. So the difference between pleasure and pain is a difference of sensory experience. It's a difference of interpretation. But the range of pleasure and pain is still one within the experience of life. Hey, Connie. So when we think about our lives in general, our day-to-day lives, even our movement, we're in a period of expansion or contraction. We're in a period of moving over and then counteracting and moving back. This is the basic principles of breathing. It's the basic principles of movement. When we walk, we don't walk in a dead straight line. We throw ourselves deliberately off balance and then we course correct. And then we throw ourselves off balance the other way and we course correct. So that's really what this equinox is representing for us, is that life is this continual process of throwing off balance and course correcting. And course correcting implies that we have an intention, we have an overall aim and direction. So when you look at how a plane flies, they type the destination into the computer, and then they go like this, getting there. They wiggle back and forth. They're never going straight. They're constantly course correcting, off course correct, off course correct, off course correct. And that's what a power of a vision can do for us. So at a time like this, a time like the solstice, we are inherently way off balance. We're on the dark, dark internal end of the spectrum. We get to look at, what does that mean in my life? I'm going internal, so this is the internal solstice, not the external summer solstice. If you're in the southern hemisphere, flip everything I'm saying around about being external. But for the winter solstice, we get to reflect inwards. And so we take this moment to look inwards and look at where we may have been resisting being off balance in our lives, where we may have been trying and struggling to create balance, even though balance isn't a natural state of being. We can be in harmony, but we're not always in balance. Because being in balance would imply that we're not experiencing life through these sensory dichotomies of good, bad, light, dark, pleasure, pain. And that's how we experience life. Hey, Kim. Kim, you're here. You can add some even more yogic perspective. That's really exciting. I was like, oh, Kim's here. So please add even more. So, we're going through this constant back and forth. Hey, Terry, we're going through this constant back and forth. And that back and forth, we find harmony in that. And we find harmony in it by witnessing the imbalance, right? So this is a moment, this internalizing moment of the solstice. I love you too! This internalizing moment of the solstice, we get to look at the areas where we have been asking and trying to create balance, where perhaps the better approach would be to witness the imbalance with an unattached mind. So that's, Buddhist philosophy gets into this concept of non-attachment. But what we're talking about is allowing for these swings, allowing for the entire spectrum of pleasure and pain to exist. And that is okay. It's okay that the spectrum exists. It's okay that, hi, Larry. It's okay that light and dark exist. It's okay that internal and external exist. It's okay that sometimes we need to rest and sometimes we're really hyper. It's okay that sometimes we need to eat less and sometimes we really feel hungry. That it's okay that we move along these different spectrums and finding our way to what's right in the moment. And what's right in the moment is where we find harmony. It's in the non-resistance, it's in the resistance that we get really hung up. So on something like the solstice, which represents on a giant astronomical level this imbalance in the world, that things are not balanced, that we swing from one to the other, we can look at ourselves and say, where have I been trying to create balance where perhaps I could accept more imbalance? Where have I been resisting? So a lot of us don't like some of the things that happen in our lives. We don't like our sad moods. We don't like our struggles. We don't like our, maybe our bank accounts. We don't like people in our lives. And especially as we're going into the holidays, we're going to be going through a lot more extremes, right? Extreme emotions, extreme exhaustion, extreme excitement, and then extreme I'm overstimulated, I've got to go home. So we go through these extremes and then we judge them. But it's actually the judging that causes the lack of harmony, not the imbalance itself, because we're always going from one to another. If we didn't have those moments of deep repose where we draw inwards, where we refresh, where we rejuvenate and reflect on ourselves and breathe, then we wouldn't have these moments of expansion because we wouldn't be able to experience them. Because life is an experiential process, right? It's something that's happening through our sensory experience. And our sensory experience is through dichotomies. So thinking today about this resistance to imbalance, and can we allow imbalance to still be perfect? Because the world is whole. The world is whole, the world is perfect. So yes, we're talking about it on a spectrum side to side, but it's actually a spectrum all the way around a circle. So we're constantly moving on this circle because everything is whole and it's already done. Not already done, but already complete. And it's our resistance to that wholeness that causes this tension in ourselves. Hey, Maria, that causes this tension in ourselves. So really embracing imbalance today, seeing it as a natural part of of life. Whoops, trying to get rid of a text message. Seeing imbalance as a natural part of life and realizing that when you walk, you're throwing yourself off balance. When you breathe, you're inhaling, you're taking in air. There's no exhaling while you're inhaling. That's an extreme imbalance, right? The breath is never in harmony, but we can find that we never in balance, but we can find that sense of harmony as we exhale just as much. But we have to let in a ton to be able to let out as much. Just like we have to return inwards in the winter solstice to be able to go out in the summer solstice, or vice versa, depending on where you are in the world right now. So really reflecting on imbalance and the perfection of imbalance, the perfection of it. Because there's nothing wrong with being out of balance. That's normal. It's part of life. We stabilize, we come back, we decide what we really want, we course correct, right? And that's really where we get to be intentional with it, because we can choose how we want to be. We can set intentions, we can set visions for ourselves, and then we know how to course correct. So when you're walking, it's easy. We do it naturally. We decide where we want to go and we move towards that point. We don't notice that we're constantly throwing ourselves off balance to get there. But metaphorically, when this happens, it feels a lot shittier, right? Metaphorically, we're like, but I want to be, a millionaire with like this beautiful family and a supermodel partner. And then anytime we have these little wiggles side to side, and they could be really big wiggles side to side where like, oh, we go broke and then we go bankrupt and then we make money and then we lose it all and then we meet somebody and then we mess it up and, we go back and forth. We don't see that that's still walking in a straight line because we get attached to the imbalance. But the imbalance is part of the forward-moving process. Hey, David. Santosh Ananda. Balance is part of the forward-moving process, or imbalance is part of the process. So taking this lesson from walking, taking this lesson from life, taking this lesson from the celestial movements and the solstice that's happening about where in your life you've been resisting this imbalance or making imbalance mean something that it doesn't mean. Because you still might be on the right course. You still might be headed in the direction that you intended. You still might be moving towards becoming the person that you want to be. Which is why I hashtag this becoming you, right? This is about becoming ourselves and allowing ourselves to soften into what is and to soften into the knowingness that everything is okay and we're creating ourselves over time. So looking at resistance, that is my timer that my egg bake is done. But looking at resistance today, looking at allowing yourself to find harmony. So we're going into the witnessing mind. Witness the imbalance. Witness over the next few weeks when you're around family and friends, witness those incredible moments of joy, the high end of the extreme of pleasure. And then witness those moments of like absolute exhaustion. I can't take another sound. Would somebody please stop talking? And who turned on that loud toy? The opposite end, right? Pain. Witness those moments with just a tiny step back from your involvement in it, because those are natural parts of the process. It's natural to be completely imbalanced in the pleasure and happiness, and then completely imbalanced in the displeasure and sadness and exhaustion. And it's only our attachment to what those things mean about us and what they mean about the future and what they mean about us as good people and whether or not we're going to cope with life and oh, this means that I'm never going to feel better and all of that, like that's where we get into the trouble. So taking a step back, using your witnessing mind to appreciate imbalance in your life, using this winter solstice if you're in the northern hemisphere to look inwards, to give yourself that time for self-reflection and knowing that we're going to it's always going to course correct, right? Because we're in a oneness. We're in a state of oneness, so we're just moving along the dichotomy, the spectrum that's moving in a circle. All right, if you're just joining, I have an egg bake and the timer is going, so I've got to go, but go back and watch this. And if you have any questions or any thoughts or reflections on this, please share them. I would love to hear what you think of the solstice and how you approach the solstice. Again, I talked about just one concept here, the concept of imbalance and harmony, and allowing ourselves to drop the resistance to being out of balance, because being out of balance is a natural state of being. It's the way that we move through the world as sensory, experiential beings. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on the solstice, so please pop them below. We can all learn and all have great ideas on how to honor our experience today and moving forward in the winter. Mwah!